built on trust, fueled by kindness, powered by Provisor. Welcome to the Ben Revak Mortgage Podcast.
So Shelley, going into 2026, what advice would you give to first-time home buyers who have heard out there in the market that, things are hopeless, you can't buy a house, costs are too high? What would you tell them?
Gosh, hopeless is such a hopeless thing to
dismal.
say. Yeah, I don't live on that side of the glass half empty,
Me neither.
And I think what I would say is that they need to remember that real estate, like probably every other part of their life, is local, which means that instead of examining the headlines of what's going on in, what the talking heads are saying is happening in the world, they need to examine their own life, their own job prospects, their own, budget, their own ability to, what's going on in their community. They need to connect with maybe a good local realtor and a good lender to say, what's it actually like in whatever community I live in, Metro Milwaukee or whatever in general. They need to look at all of those local factors and assess what's housing look like for me, and then if they don't like what they see, they can pull one of those levers. They can increase their savings, pay down their debt, better themselves in their job, whatever it's going to take to get them to home buying. But it's
starting to now, I always tell people that don't underwrite your own loan.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't tell yourself why you're not going to qualify.
Right.
Let me look at it together with you and we'll figure it out, because more than likely there's a solution.
Right. And just because there may be an issue, maybe they don't have enough down payment, that doesn't mean you can't fix that.
Exactly. Yep.
Once there's a lot of clarity that comes from knowing what's going on, and then you can from there make a plan, and it might take 6 months or it might be a year.
Yep.
But it's going to be a 6 months or a year process whenever they start. So start now.
Yep, exactly. I couldn't have said it better. That's a glass half empty is no way to live.
No, it's not. And I get so frustrated when I hear people talk about that Millennials and Gen Z can't buy houses, because it's just not true. I see them buy houses every day.
Yeah.
And, I think every economy has difficult things, and every time in our world has had a time that, felt really expensive, but gosh, this is your life and you got to build it. So you work within what you have and you make it better as you can.
Yep. And at the end of the day, we all need a place to live, and they're not making land anymore.
No. So. And you're going to pay somebody.
Yeah.
You're either going to pay your landlord's mortgage or you're going to pay your mortgage. So I'm going to bet on myself every time.
Yep. Amen to that. Yeah. There's a lot of negativity. I mean, you hear all the time, like, the market's going to crash tomorrow. Like,
yeah,
those people will eventually be right, but it might be another 30 years or 40 years or 50 or not. Like, you just don't know.
Yeah.
And so, like, do you want to live under a rock in fear, or do you want to take the most with what you have, figure out what your options are, and then move forward towards a better life?
And there's a lot of benefit to being in control of your own payment. We sold a house last year to a young man who went into it planning on having 2 roommates. He probably, I wasn't his lender, but he probably barely qualified. But he did qualify.
Yep.
And he qualified knowing that he had a 3-bedroom house and he could bring in 2 buddies and they would help make that mortgage from something that was pretty high to something that was way less than he would have paid in rent. And he's in control. And they're helping him pay that house off. So, there's lots of house hacking options. There's lots of ways to make it more affordable. So you have to just jump in and start working on it.
That's what I did with my first place.
Yeah, you bought a duplex, right?
I was 19.
Yeah.
I should not have gotten that loan.
Yeah. they do crazy things.
I was qualified. I don't know how I was qualified. Knowing what I know now, I was 19. I had 1 credit card, I think.
Yeah.
Like 6 months on the job.
Yeah.
It was pretty wild.
Yeah.
But, the house is paid off now.
Oh,
that was in 2010.
Yeah.
It's 2026. It's paid off. I have great tenants. The cash flows. Just probably the best investment I'll make in my lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. I think duplexes as a vehicle for first-time home buyers, especially when they they don't have kids yet. They have the option to live somewhere that's probably not their favorite, maybe a little bit smaller than they wanted, but they can live there and really earn something and then keep it.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I talk to a first-time buyer and they come in with this like just so much uncertainty. They don't know. And but they had the courage to take that first step.
Yep.
And so they're having a conversation. And you can just see throughout the conversation, like they're talking about their job, they're talking about what they've saved up. And I get asked all the time, like, well, we don't have 20% down, so we're just not sure if we can. Like, very few people have 20% down. And
even the buyers that we know that often have 20% down, they're not putting it in their house.
They're not.
You know, they're making the choice to leave money in savings and put 10% down or you know, something like that because that's.
Well, you don't want to be cash poor. I mean, if you, now that you own the house, when the water heater breaks, which something goes wrong.
Something will always.
Something will go wrong and you'll want to be prepared for that. So yeah, it's really, I think that's the piece of my job that I enjoy maybe the most is the best way to say it. It's like seeing the people make that progress in their life. Helping them through that huge investment in themselves.
Yeah.
Like that, it's so rewarding.
Well, you know, Ben, so many areas of our lives, we hear about coaches, right?
Yeah.
Like people don't think anything about hiring a personal trainer or going to a nutritionist or, you know, seeing somebody to help them in their job. Sitting down with people to help you figure out home ownership. Therefore, you know, realtors and lenders, it's just another coach. It's another person who knows what the path looks like, how to get there, and can sit down and help you assess your situation. And sometimes that means, you know, helping them decide, gosh, it's not time yet, or maybe I need to go to a different community than I originally thought, or I need to buy something slightly different than I originally planned, because you're making a financial choice, you know, and so it's important, but it's important to have guidance in that.
Yeah, and I think I'll be the first to tell somebody if something isn't in their best interest. Like there's a lot of situations that I'll run into where I'm like, you know, I could help you, but you're going to get a much better deal just because of the way the mortgage industry is structured. You're going to get a better deal if you go talk to this guy over here or this gal over at this lender, this local credit. You know, there's just some products that are best served by other lenders. And I'll be the first to tell somebody that. I just had a consultation this morning with a gal who is looking at refinancing. She actually found me off of Google.
Okay.
She was one of the first.
Because you have so many Google reviews.
I have so many Google reviews. She was the first refinance to ever reach out to me off my Google reviews.
Okay.
I was so excited. But, you know, we go through the numbers and it's like she'd save about $66 a month on a 30-year fixed refi.
It's not much.
It's not much. And so we did all the math. We figured it out. And I said, you know, her name was Karen. I said, she's very nice. I said, Karen, if I were you, like doing this is kind of a coin flip. Like it's going to save you a little bit, but your break even is like 4 years to recoup the cost of just the closing costs. Because you're not, even though her interest rate was going down a full percentage point, when we do the math, she had a kind of a low loan balance and she only owed about $220,000 on her house. It's like, it didn't make sense. Now, what could make sense is if she wanted to pay off her house sooner and she went down to a 15-year, the payment would go up about $400 a month. And she was kind of considering that, but it might not be the best fit for her either. So I guess that coaching consultative approach, I never have a dog in the fight. I just want to educate and then let that individual make the best decision that they can, an educated decision. And that is what really takes the pressure off of everybody in the transaction. It's like making educated decisions. You got to live with your own choice, but you're making the best choice you can. And that's where I really find pleasure in what I do. And I know that you guys take the same approach over at the real estate studio.
Oh, yeah.
Because I work with so many of the agents over there. Like, I've never once seen any agent put any sort of pressure on a client. It's always very consultative and understanding and asking tons of questions. And just the time that you guys take to do an initial consultation to understand what someone's goals are. It's just a really, really good, it's fun working with people that you like and that work in the same values.
Yeah. I mean, at the real estate studio, we really believe that part of being a professional is really taking that opportunity to consult for the client, to ask. We teach a process where we try to ask, 3 to 5 questions deep, so that, because the truth is, Ben, if somebody asks you a question, that initial answer you give is probably not the whole answer, right?
It's never
just what comes off the top of your head. It's when somebody takes the time to ask you the second question and the third question, and then one more follow-up question, that you really get to the root of what you need, what you know, what's important to you. And so we have to help clients get past what their mom told them, what their guy at work did, what they heard down,
what dad did when he bought his house in 1994.
Yeah, all the things to say, what's really important to me?
Yep.
Where do I need to live? What do I need to look like? And so we teach our agents to be very relationally focused, not transactionally focused, because, we might win one transaction because we did it quick and dirty, but that's not good for the client, and it's ultimately not good for our business. It's not good professionalism.
Well, you're not going to grow in the long term if that's your reputation. I think reputation is everything, and I'd rather do the right thing 1,000 times and lose the deal every time than do the wrong thing to try to get a deal out of desperation when there's something clearly in that individual's best interest that's not me. And sometimes it's just not doing a loan at all. Like in a case of a refinance, like it's not about selling a product. It's about understanding that person and making sure that you can help them in the best way you can, and that they're going into it eyes wide open, so they know exactly what their options are.
Yeah. And they know when they chose that, why they chose it. What risk they took on with that choice. And what their options are going to be, as they go through that down the road. Like, I have a closing on Friday, and those clients, it's winter, and they got a house a little bit undervalued. They were able to find a pretty good deal, and we went into it knowing that it had older mechanicals, it has an older roof, it has older windows, all of the things. But they were comfortable that the price they were paying was equal to the amount of risk and the amount of things they were going to have to do over the next 5 years. But they would rather do those things one by one than have a higher mortgage payment.
When you look at, you can show them then historically, like, what was spring like in 2025?
Exactly.
This house, here's this exact house, 2 blocks over, sold for, $35,000 more. And guess what? It's probably going to be the same this spring. It already is.
Exactly.
Every offer seems to have 6 or 7 offers competing.
And on the flip side of that, those sellers, our understanding is they needed to move for a job, and they had a new baby, and, they had various things. So for them, a smooth, easy transaction was better than maybe $5,000 more. They just wanted it to go
the timing was
and
important.
Easy and happen at a holiday time of the year. So, it's a win-win, and that's what we like to look like for our clients, is what is it that meets the needs that you've come into the transaction with?
That's funny you say that, like, you describe it like that, because you are the only agent that I've ever met that has gotten a waterfront access property, an accepted offer with a double home sale contingency. In the middle of the spring crazy buyer market. I have no idea how you did that, but it was truly a win. The listing agent called me and was like, the buyers are really willing to work with what we need. And I'm like, oh my God, Shelley's going to pull this off.
I was feeling the same way. I was like, I can't believe this. Part of it was working with a good lender, because I was able to, and when those buyers first came to me and they said, here's our idea, right? We've got all these moving parts. We want to combine these households. We want to do it in this certain way, in this certain place. I said to them, that's great. Have you talked to a lender? No, we'll be fine. And I was like, no, we won't be fine.
We need to make
sure that we have all the answers we need to know before we fall in love with a house. And so they, I set them up with you, and that really helped, because in the midst of competition, we were able to lay out a clear plan of how we were going to accomplish it and get it to closing, even in the midst of having to sell 2 other houses and having, a financing contingency and all the things. And ultimately, that's what made it happen.
And I know for a fact that listing agent looked at comps on both of those houses for sale.
Because of course she did.
She called me.
That was what she should do.
She called me, and she was like, she wanted to make sure that they had enough proceeds if they had to go down in sales price.
That was I would say that was a story of everybody actually working toward the same goal. But you and I were the orchestrators of that, as it should be.
That's kind of the principle that underlies this edge that we're looking at. Like, if we can better the industry as a whole in our local market, there's a co-broke on it, most deals. Almost every deal.
You're going into a house to see if your clients want it, and you're automatically going to be working with the person on that sign in most cases. And I'll tell you, there are times that when I see that sign in the front of the yard, I'm like, oh, okay, here we go. You know,
buckle up if they want to ride up. Or...
You know, or I think I don't know this person, but I have tried at this point to call them 6 times and they haven't answered. You know, or they've answered my phone calls with a text reply. And, you know, that makes it difficult to communicate. And so, you know, I teach my agents at the real estate studio to communicate that part of being a professional and doing good business is communicating well, remaining calm and non-emotional, and thinking strategically about how to help the client achieve what it is that they want to achieve. Because, you know, Ben, sometimes I'm 100% on board. I'm like, yes, I want you to get that. But I'll be honest, there's times that I think that's not, I wouldn't do that. But that's
Especially
okay.
when you know what they want and you can see that they're making the decision based on something else, like emotion, like a fear, or, or somebody like mom or dad's telling them something. And you know that it's not right for them.
Or they're just, dare I say it, they're just a jerk. I mean, I hate it when I have to represent somebody that I think is acting in a way that is not how it's not how I would act, but I have a responsibility to represent them well. And so, you know, that's what I do to the best of my knowledge. And if I can't, then I terminate that relationship.
There's always that line where you're like,
there's that line.
We're not a good fit. And there's a way to say it too.
We actually did that in scripts a couple of weeks ago. Something came up and it turned into a fair housing situation. We deliberately turned it into it. And we practiced and I was the client. And so the agent that I was practicing with, I was literally trying to push every like racial button I could to see. And it did not take long. And she said, you know, unfortunately, I just don't think we're gonna be able to work together. And I was like, okay, that's what I wanted to hear. Because
so you guys actually practice having those tough conversations.
Yes.
So is that's something that any agent at the studio has access to?
Yeah, absolutely. We do once a week, we do what's called scripts. We have it in both English and in Spanish. And we literally take real life scenarios that our agents are going through and we script them. We talk, you know, push on each other, try to get each other, like figure out how we would answer and how we'd say it better. We also have a couple of fun ways, like some card games and things that, you know, we can draw cards that give scenarios. But you know, we all need to process how we're going to say something. We all need to enter those conversations with our words clear and concise. We don't need to verbally work it out in front of our client.
Because you're still going to have that feeling in the pit of your stomach when you're having that tough conversation. But I think when you've gotten the rust off, you've done it once. Even if it's a practice run in a training. It absolutely makes a difference.
We talk about that, about the fact that, you know, obviously we don't know exactly how it's going to go, but we've said it before, you know, and people get like, well, I don't like scripts. Well, the truth is we all use scripts, right? Like I bet, Ben, when you put your kids to bed at night, you say pretty much the same thing every night. You know, and that's a script, right? That is a set of words that you use to move that action along. That's exactly how it is in real estate. These are the things that I say. These are the ways I explain. And so the more we can do that and get comfortable with the terminology, with the language, it also often turns into a contract training because we will, wait, what's the contract say? Let's pull that out. How do we use that well? And because knowing your contract is so important so that you can use it for the benefit of your client.
I have, there's so many ideas in my head we could talk about right now. On the subject of contracts, especially, it's so important to know because I just talked to an agent yesterday. Their client is putting down like 50%. So they're buying a house for like $400. They're going to put $200 down. They want to get an appraisal done, but they don't want to have an appraisal contingency. Because we don't know for sure until they have an accepted offer if we'll need an appraisal to do their loan. But in their case, unless the house appraises $100,000 short, which it won't, there's no need to have an appraisal contingency in their offer. It won't affect their financing.
In fact, they could write in an appraisal gap.
They can
very easily because they've got enough funds. They're well over 20%.
Well, they're going to waive it entirely. So they're just going to put a line on the additional comments. You know, buyers the right to get an appraisal done for the purpose of their lender, but it can't be negotiated. It can't be negotiated. And the agent thought that there was a line in the contract that said that the buyer could have the appraiser access the property even without an appraisal contingency, just by the way the offer was written, like the pre-form offer.
Okay.
So I don't think so. Like, let's look. So we're on the phone. We both pull up the contract and we're looking through it. Well, on line like 358, under, I believe, no financing contingency, there's a line that allows an appraiser to access it, but only if you don't have a financing contingency. If you write it with a financing contingency, then you have to put an additional comment in if you want to have contractual access to get an appraisal done.
Yep.
And so we talked through it, and she's like, oh, wow, I thought my office had told me. And I was like, oh, well, I'm glad we looked, because that would be a pickle if the seller decided, well, we're not going to let the appraiser in. Well, now we have no way to complete the contract, so we can't perform. So, and it's just talking through those things in real time I enjoy that. I like digging into the nuance, like getting in the weeds.
Oh, yeah. All of the little things, the little tips, like I tell you what I would say for that agent is, if you have somebody and they're not going to do an appraisal contingency, and they shouldn't, and they've got that much cash down, I would send a proof of funds for that amount of cash along with your offer.
And they're going to. We talked about that too. And she's like, yeah, we do that all. She's like, I do that all the time. I was like, good, because I see a lot. I have a weird perspective, Shelley. I only see the deals that win. I only see the offers that win. I don't see all the offers that don't win.
That's true.
I get copied. I sometimes see them, because the agents that I work with a lot of times will copy me on the email.
But you probably don't peruse them.
I don't really read through the contract. Like, I'll look at the big details, like, the contingency dates, and if there's anything strange in there. And if the listing agent calls me, then we'll look at it together if they have specific questions. But in general, I'm only looking at accepted offers. And so my perspective is what works. And so I love it when an agent reaches out and says, like, hey, what wiggle room do we have to be more competitive? Because it's like, I could answer that in my sleep. Like, well, they could do an appraisal gap up to this. They could, they could do a home inspection with a gap up to, $5,000. We can waive, like, we can be so creative. We can do loan commitment in a week. Like,
well, I was gonna say, like with my daughter, when we knew she was going to be competitive, we got you got her fully underwritten. And we actually made a 2-week offer with no financing contingency. And I remember the agent called me and she said, now wait, we have your offer and you have no financing contingency. So is it cash? And I said, no. I sent you a pre-approval. We're financing, but we have no contingency. And she's like, I think you have to have a contingency. And I said, no, you don't. And we kind of went back and forth a little bit. And I finally said to her, it's like I just gave you loan commitment. And she said, okay, well, I'm going to call the lender. And then she called you, but it worked.
I remember that call and the offer. I said, if you really want to, you could counter with the financing contingency. She kind of laughed and they didn't counter.
No, they did not counter. But we had lost 3 houses in a row trying to compete in a very active market in a very sought after price point. And so we were able to that was a way to increase the competitiveness for her when she couldn't really increase her price.
Brookfield's a hot one. Good luck.
A destination.
It is. So one of the things that I run into a lot is when a client asks me a question, what I found is more, if it's a deep question, more often than not, what they're asking me isn't really what they're asking. They're looking for something and they don't know how to ask their question.
Or it feels awkward.
I found that I have to follow up and ask like probing questions. And in my experience, I coach loan officers. And when I'm coaching loan officers, there's this apprehension to ask questions, especially for newer LOs, but some experienced loan officers too. And there's like this apprehension to ask. They almost have to ask permission, like, can I ask you a couple questions? And that's kind of what my script is. We're talking about how you have a process and a general script. I go off script a lot, but my general script is, that's a great question. Can I ask you a couple questions to kind of figure out what what the answer is? And then we dig deep. And is that something that you guys work on in scripts, is like, because sometimes people will look at you funny when you ask them a question, but that you need an answer in order to help them. So how does that
well, everybody has their way that they say it, but we talk about that, about how do you get permission into somebody's life? How do you get permission to ask them about things that normally feel a little bit more awkward? And so we'll practice that, practice different ways of, well, what if I said it like this? Or what if I, and a lot of times what works is just acknowledging, like, hey, this is going to be an awkward question, but how much money do you have? Like, what's your cash sitting at?
And when you ask it like that with a smile, they're so defensive. They're like, oh, well, yeah, of course you need to know.
Exactly.
You're the one helping me buy this house.
Yeah, well, and you can follow it up. You can say, here's why.
Yep.
Because, like we had 2 young buyers last summer that had big savings, but were really tight on monthly payment.
Yep.
And so it made a lot of sense once we discussed with them that they did have a big savings, but that, even $50 more a month was kind of a big deal, that in a competitive market that they paid commission themselves out of their cash reserves. And therefore, that gave them, again, another lever of competitiveness to say no commission requested.
Well, yeah, you appeal to that list. There's no better selling point than an offer.
Now you're giving the seller, $6,000-$8,000 extra without increasing your purchase price. And so, but we wouldn't have even known that had we not realized that they did have the money, or sometimes we'll find out in a question that it really matters, a school district or something will really matter. And they'll be telling you, like, there's like a certain city, but they actually mean a school district, which actually would allow them to maybe cross a boundary that puts them in a different tax scenario, a different, and still meets the need, but isn't the original thing you were told.
Yes.
So I always, personally, I say things like, gosh, I'm going to ask you a bunch of intrusive questions. I'm sorry. I'm trying to help you, and that seems to kind of warm people up.
Yep. Well, I think at that point, you've already built so much trust with that client that they know that you're acting in their best interest, and they're willing to open up and share. And, there are some clients where if they don't open up, and sometimes I have to say, like, those are really good questions, and I can't give you a good answer because I'd be doing you a disservice by making a guess.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of times people have a very complicated situation, and they'll say, what's your rate today? Well, is your income over or under 120,000?
Right.
Because you're a first-time buyer, and your rate, if your income's over, is 7%, and if it's under, it's 6.25%.
Right.
So I really don't know. Like, I have to calculate.
There's a lot of questions. Yeah.
And you're like, well, I make 120 and I'm hourly. Well, then I have to calculate it because if underwriting thinks you make $120 and $5,
right,
your rate's 7. So I really got to see the papers.
Another thing about Ben makes me think about like asking people all these questions is that as realtors, we have a duty of confidentiality.
Yeah.
And I like to always state that out loud.
Yep.
And I've worked with a lot of younger couples who I know their parents, or vice versa.
Yep.
But it's usually that I'm, working with the couple. And so maybe they have a great relationship with their parents. Maybe they don't. Maybe their mom and dad knows what they make. Maybe they don't.
Yep.
And so I like to always just upfront say, listen, I want to remind you, I have a duty of confidentiality, and it extends beyond the transaction. It extends forever.
Yep.
So if your mom calls me tomorrow and says, how's it going with the house search? I'm going to say something really benign, like, great. And anything beyond that, you need to ask them.
Yep.
And because that's important, that they know they can trust us.
100%.
That we're not going to just spill their news to the whole world.
Yep, absolutely. And especially in my world, it's like we see everything.
Yeah.
We're behind the curtain looking around, poking, prodding. Like, there's, I've seen just about everything.
Oh, yeah. And you don't want, we none of us want to think that the loan officer or the realtor is going to walk out of the room and be like, oh my gosh, did you know, and tell their big secret, that people have a right to privacy.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I run into, not frequently, but often enough that it's worth talking about, is when people try to withhold stuff from a loan officer. Like, my job is to help you get your end result. If I don't know about something, it's probably going to come up later.
Yeah.
And when it comes up later, we have less options to solve it.
Yeah.
So let's get it all out there on the table. If there's a way to get your goal accomplished with that out there, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Like, we're on the same team. That is the right approach, I think, to helping people is we're on the same team together. We're working towards the same goal, and we have to have a trust. We have to have and not everyone wants that, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Then we're probably not the best fit to work together.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah. Thanks. This was easy.
Easy peasy.